If someone had ever told me that a chance encounter could tear my peaceful life into pieces, I would have laughed. But fate never knocks gently. It crashes in like a storm, sweeping away everything I once believed in. And the man standing in the middle of that storm was the one I once thought was a dream. My name is Ella, and this is the story of how I loved, lost everything, and ultimately found myself again. I was 27 years old then, working as a librarian at an old library in the small town of Brooksville, Maine. My life was so simple it bordered on dull. Mornings spent dusting ancient bookshelves, afternoons reading in a dimly lit break room, evenings locking up and quietly walking back to my rented apartment on the third floor of a worn-out brick building. Friends? None. Dating? I couldn't even remember the last time someone asked me out for coffee. I was not the type to attract attention. A plain face, brown hair tied neatly at the back, a petite figure swallowed by towering shelves. I had grown used to being overlooked, almost invisible, and I accepted it. Or at least, I thought I did. Until the day he walked in. It was a September afternoon when the first cold winds of fall began to scatter the fiery red leaves. I was reorganizing the fiction section when a warm voice spoke behind me. I'm looking for something different. Can you help me? I turned around, almost dropping the stack of books in my hands. Standing before me was a man around 30 years old, tall, with slightly tousled blonde hair and a simple gray sweater that somehow radiated effortless confidence. His blue eyes lit up when he looked at me, as if I were the very book he had been searching for. I stammered, "What genre are you interested in?" He shrugged, a half-smile playing on his lips. Surprised me. I picked out The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern for him, a story both darkly magical and shimmering with hope. As I handed him the book, our fingers brushed briefly. A spark of electricity shot through me, making me instinctively pull back. He just smiled. A smile that made my heart pound uncomfortably fast. His name was Daniel. After that day, Daniel became almost a fixture at the library. He would often drop by late in the afternoon, sometimes just to borrow books, but more often to chat with me about everything under the sun. Instead of asking about literature, Daniel asked about me. What foods I liked, what dreams I had beyond the dusty shelves. I, who had carefully built invisible walls around myself, found them crumbling effortlessly in front of him. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, as if I truly mattered. Maybe it was because, in my tiny, monotonous world, Daniel was like a fresh breeze, gentle, yet utterly irresistible. 3 weeks after our first meeting, while I was tidying up the history section, Daniel showed up, holding a clumsily bundled bouquet of wildflowers. "Ella," he said, his voice suddenly serious, "I know this might sound crazy, but I have never been more certain about anything in my life." I stared at him, feeling like I had wandered into a strange, beautiful dream. Daniel took a deep breath and knelt down, right there between the narrow aisles of bookshelves. "Marry me." No ring, no candles, no red roses, just a handful of wildflowers, a man with sincerity shining in his eyes, and my heart hammering so hard it nearly suffocated me. I laughed, a sound bursting out after years of silence, and choked out, "Yes." In that moment, the whole world seemed to shrink to just the two of us. No cramped little town, no judgmental glances. Only us, and a promise of a future filled with love. I did not know that this yes would launch me into a journey far beyond anything I could imagine. A path strewn with buried secrets, dark schemes, and ruthless betrayals. But at that moment, I loved Daniel with all my innocent, unguarded heart. I believed that love was simple, a question, a nod, and forever. I was wrong. I still remember that feeling that day, sharp like a needle of cold steel piercing my chest. We arrived in New Hampshire on a gray Saturday morning where Daniel's family lived in a 3-story traditional American mansion. complete with white balconies and a wrought iron gate covered in climbing roses. The scene should have comforted me. Instead, my heart hammered as if warning me that something terrible was about to happen. Daniel, meanwhile, was unnervingly relaxed. He drove with one hand, the other arm resting casually out the window, humming along with the radio, paying no mind to my hand clenching the hem of my dress. I turned to look at him. "Are you sure they know I'm coming today?" "They know, don't worry. My mom's just a bit strict and my dad's, well, not very talkative. But they will like you. You're the most special person I've ever loved, Ella." He said it without even glancing at me, as if reading from an old script. When the car stopped in front of the house, I barely had time to step out before the wooden door swung open, revealing her, Daniel's mother, standing there as if she had been waiting. She was tall, thin, her face sharp and cold, eyes like polished blades. Following behind her was her husband, George, who seemed calm, but whose gaze dissected my every move. "Ellen, is it?" Her voice as sour as old lemon. "You look simpler than I expected." I forced a polite smile and extended my hand. "Nice to meet you, ma'am. Daniel has told me so much about you." Linda did not take my hand. She simply turned around. "Come in, dinner is waiting." I swallowed a lump in my throat. Their attitude was crystal clear. Daniel just shrugged and gestured for me to go ahead. That small act should have felt protective. Instead, I felt like prey being led into a den. Dinner played out like a tribunal. Linda sat at the head of the table, her eyes scanning every move I made, looking for cracks. George silently carved meat, only occasionally tossing a question at me like a sledgehammer. "So, Ella, you're a librarian, right? Must be pretty easygoing in a small town like Brooksville." I kept my voice steady. "Yes, the work is steady. But I love books, and the library gives me peace." Linda smirked. "Peace, huh? I think young women should aim for something more practical." "Daniel mentioned you never went to graduate school?" I froze. Daniel had promised he would not bring that up. He knew I had given up my scholarship to care for my sick mother, then never got another chance. "Yes, I only finished college, but I do not believe a degree defines a person." "Oh, of course, Linda sneered. "But in our family, education is very important. Daniel, you should explain more to Ella about our family traditions." I turned to Daniel, hoping he would defend me. But he just chuckled dryly and scooped more mashed potatoes onto his plate. "Come on, Mom, education is not the only standard. Ella has a good heart. That is what really matters, right?" I froze. His words sounded like support, but reduced me to a pitiful girl. To be pitied for a good heart, rather than being seen as an equal. I could not eat anymore. My throat was parched. My hands resting on my lap began to tremble slightly. Every word in that room felt like a sharp knife, slicing away pieces of my self-esteem. After dinner, Linda took me on a tour of the house, or rather, a discreet inspection. In each room, she emphasized, half jokingly, "This is Daniel's study. Very private. I hope you respect the boundaries. Those paintings are all auction pieces, not the kind you buy at cheap stores. Our family is not used to sharing space with outsiders. But because Daniel wants it, we will try to accept it." I said nothing. Inside, the coldness spread gradually. On the way home, I was completely silent. Daniel glanced absent-mindedly out the window, not once asking how I felt. Finally, I had to speak. "You said they would like me." He shrugged. "They just need time to get used to you. My mama's a bit old-fashioned. Do not take it personally. Besides, I still choose you, right?" That sentence, "I still choose you," choked me. It did not sound like a partner speaking. It sounded like a king bestowing a favor. I turned my face toward the window, hiding my stinging eyes. It was not because of Linda. It was not because of George. It was because the man I thought would be my husband stood by and watched me be humiliated, doing nothing. The feeling of love began to give way to something else, vague, but quietly burning under my skin. Doubt. About a week after that forgettable meeting, Daniel called me to a coffee shop downtown Brooksville. That day was foggy, the wind howling between the narrow alleys like a forgotten warning. He sat there, turning his coffee cup, unable to meet my eyes. My heart sank. I recognized that look. It never came bearing good news. "Ella," Daniel began, his voice strangely low. "You know I love you, right?" I clutched my scarf tighter, forcing a smile. "What is going on?" He sighed, then dropped the words like a bomb. "My mom. She wants us to sign a prenuptial agreement before the wedding." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I laughed, a dry, bitter sound I could not suppress. "You mean, they think I am marrying you for money?" Daniel remained silent. I stared at him, hoping for a denial from the man I loved, but no. He just lowered his gaze, avoiding mine. "They just want to make sure, Ella. You know, my family has assets, and they have their own lawyer. They say it is necessary to protect both sides." "Protect who?" I hissed. "What do I have to take from you? A rundown rented apartment? A library job with just enough to live on? And they have a 3-story house, luxury cars, company shares, and a reputation. What am I in their eyes, Daniel? A gold digger in a cheap dress?" He still said nothing. His silence spoke louder than any words. I turned away, swallowing the tears threatening to fall. Being judged was one thing. Being abandoned by the one you love was a wound that cut deeper. "So, I have the right to know exactly what this agreement says, right?" Daniel nodded slightly. They already sent a draft to my lawyer. If you want, I can show it to you." 2 days later, I sat in their living room, a thick contract placed before me, beside a man named Richard, their family lawyer. Daniel sat next to me but had turned into a mere shadow, not a word from him. Richard flipped through the pages, his voice as monotonous as reading a vacuum cleaner manual. "Party A will retain full ownership of all assets acquired before marriage, including real estate, company shares, vehicles, and financial assets. Party B, Ella, will have no right to request any financial support after divorce, under any circumstance. Any assets generated during the marriage will be divided based on specific contributions, adjustable by mutual agreement but by default, Party A 80%, Party B 20%. If Party B makes no direct financial contributions, their share defaults to 0. I felt my blood rush to my face. My throat burned. Not a single clause mentioned me as a future wife, only as a financial risk, needing control. Linda sat opposite, arms crossed, eyes never leaving me. "This is just a procedure, Ella, a piece of paper to give everyone peace of mind. If you truly love Daniel, this should not be anything to worry about." I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to say something. He merely replied, "You know, my mom is a practical person. Everything will be easier if we just agree." I stood up, feeling as if the floor was collapsing beneath my feet. "Then let me make everyone feel at ease." 3 days later, I signed. No lawyer of my own, no objections, no negotiation. I just wanted it to be over. Daniel kissed my forehead when I handed him the paper. "Thank you, babe. I know this is not easy, but we will get through it. It is just a piece of paper." Just a piece of paper. The light phrase, hiding so much more than I could say. I did not cry that day. I did not scream or break things. I just tucked the contract copy into the nightstand drawer, next to my old typewriter, the symbol of stories I once dreamed of writing. Maybe it was time to start a new story, about a girl who signed a marriage contract, believing love would conquer all, and was crushed by the very love she trusted. And I truly believed, as long as I loved Daniel, everything would be fine. I did not know that this little piece of paper would be the only thing left to protect me, when everything else around me began to fall apart. Our wedding was quiet, just like Daniel said. We do not need to make a show, we just need each other. Back then, I thought it was genuine. Now looking back, maybe it was just a way for his family to avoid sharing their prestigious space with a bride deemed unworthy. After the wedding, I moved in with Daniel to a 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood on the west side of Portsmouth. The house was spacious, the furnishings tasteful, fully equipped, but there was an eerie coldness to it, as if every wall knew I was an unwelcome stranger. Linda started appearing more often after the brief honeymoon. She did not knock. She did not announce herself. Every visit turned into a disguised acid inspection. This vase was custom made in Italy by our family. Make sure you do not break it. This chair is real leather. Daniel picked it carefully. Ella, if you have a habit of placing drinks without coasters, you should stop. Every word felt like a splash of ice water down my spine. She did not yell or insult me outright, but the way she emphasized every item as Daniel's or ours was enough to remind me exactly of my place. An outsider, living in a house that was never meant to be mine. George, her husband, spoke less, but was no less unpleasant. Every visit, he would sprawl on the sofa, legs propped up on the glass coffee table, waving a hand at me. Get me a cold beer, the French kind, do not mess it up. Oh, and where are the shirts for laundry? Have you washed them yet? It was not a request. It was a command. Blunt, condescending, as if I was a maid hired with a few casual orders. Daniel? He just laughed it off. My parents are just picky, cut them some slack, they love me, that is why they care so much. One time, I tried to push back. Linda barged into our bedroom without hesitation. Standing in front of my closet, scrutinizing a dress I had bought during a sale. Me gown. Looks a bit expensive, does it not? Ella, you should not waste money like that. Remember, everything in this house is not bought with your money. I clenched my fists, staying calm. I used my own salary to buy it. I have never touched Daniel's money. She laughed, like I had just told the worst joke. A librarian's salary, huh? How sweet. That might cover a few cheap cups of coffee. I stood there, frozen. Daniel walked in just then, clearly having heard everything. I turned to him, hoping for support. He shrugged. Mom is just joking, why are you so tense? I looked at him, cold, detached, a stranger. Week after week, month after month, the distance between me and my husband grew. He no longer asked how I felt, no longer sat reading next to me at the end of the day. Our evenings became just television screens and meaningless laughter. He came home late, blaming meeting clients, but there was no smell of alcohol. Only the unfamiliar scent of perfume. Not mine. I began to lose sleep. Every night I would wake at 2 a.m, lying in the pitch-black room, listening to the wind howling through the cracks, asking myself, why am I still here? Why does the man who once looked at me like I was his whole world now treat me like an annoying shadow? One time, I broke a porcelain vase placed on the dining table. A small accident, my hand slipped while cleaning. Linda showed up that very afternoon, as if she had a sensor. Oh, the vase. Very valuable, but it is okay. Someone like you breaking it is normal. Be careful, if you still plan to stay in this house for a few more months. I turned to Daniel, no longer waiting, but confronting him. Are you okay with this? I am being insulted in our own home by your family. Are you just going to stay silent? He shrugged, cracking his knuckles. Ella, you are overreacting. My mom does not like outsiders touching valuable things, and you know you are an outsider. Those words. Just 6 words. But they shattered every remaining illusion. I stood up and silently walked back to the bedroom. Only one question echoed in my head. What did I sign up for? A marriage contract or a life sentence? I collapsed one Monday morning, right in the library aisle. No warning, no sharp pain, just a feeling of being completely drained, as if someone had turned off the life source inside me. When I woke up, I was lying in a hospital bed, the cold fluorescent lights glaring down at me. My head spun. Wires were attached everywhere. A nurse looked at me with pity before quietly turning away. There was no Daniel. No text messages. No phone calls. Not a single word of concern. I lay there for 3 days, alone, swallowing the bitter reality of being a wife whose absence did not even ring alarm bells for her husband's family. By the 4th afternoon, when I had almost forgotten the sound of a human voice, the hospital room door creaked open. A man in a gray suit entered, carrying a leather briefcase, looking immaculate as if he had stepped out of a Manhattan law office. "Ella Whitmore?" he asked, his voice clear and formal. I nodded, slightly startled by the seriousness in his gaze. Not cold, but undeniably firm. "I am Michael Johnson. I am here on behalf of the Harper & Lane law firm. We need to discuss a matter regarding a will and inheritance." He frowned. "Hunt, I do not have anyone who would leave anything to me." He smiled gently. "Do you remember someone named Edward Whitmore?" I stiffened. "Uncle Edward? He was my grandfather's younger brother. I have not seen him since middle school. He lived a reclusive life in Vermont, never keeping in touch with anyone." "Exactly. He passed away recently, and before he died, he left his entire estate to you, all legally documented and notarized." My mouth fell open. My brain could not process the words. "Estate? What is?" Michael Johnson opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick stack of documents. "A current investment account with $20 million in cash, diversified across multiple safe funds. You also inherit 8% of Whitmore & Stone Construction Company, netting approximately $4 million annually. A historic mansion with over 9,000 square feet, located in the outskirts of Lake Placid, New York. Additionally, a fully restored Cadillac from 1953 and a collection of antique paintings and ceramics valued at around $2.5 million. I could not speak. My heart seemed to stop for a few seconds. I blinked repeatedly, thinking it must be a drug-induced hallucination. "You are serious?" "I do not joke in hospitals, Miss Whitmore. Everything has been verified. You are the sole heir. Mr. Edward told us before he passed. Ella was the only one who remembered my birthdays 3 years in a row, even when I never responded. She never cared whether I was rich or poor. She had heart." I was stunned. It turned out, a small act from my teenage years, 3 hand-drawn birthday cards sent to a reclusive uncle, had changed the course of my entire life. Michael stood up, leaving the documents neatly on the table beside my hospital bed. "When you are well, we will arrange the transfer procedures. All the assets are currently in your name, waiting for your acceptance. And, Ella," he paused, his voice softening, "perhaps it is time you lived a completely different life." The door closed. I stared at the documents, then up at the ceiling. My eyes blurred. It was not because of the money. It was because, after such a long time, I finally felt I had value. 1 week later, I was discharged from the hospital. Daniel showed up exactly once, the night before I was to leave. His face wore the heaviness of fatigue, but his eyes lit up the moment they spotted the stack of legal documents on the table. "Did you really inherit all that money?" I did not answer. I just looked at him. Long enough for him to drop his gaze. He moved closer, his voice suddenly as tender as in the beginning. "I am sorry. I was wrong to let my mom say those things. I did not realize how tired you were. I will change. We can start over." I neither nodded nor shook my head. I just said, "I am tired. Let me be alone tonight." He left, quietly, but I knew he was not walking away out of remorse. It was calculation. I sat down, opened the documents again. Beneath the papers was a handwritten letter, firm strokes, in slightly smudged blue ink. "Ella, if you are reading this, then I am no longer here. But that does not matter. What matters is that you have survived everything and still kept your kindness. Do not let anyone dim your light. Live as you have always dreamed. I folded the letter, and after many years, I felt my heart ignite with light. Not because I was rich, but because finally I had the right to choose how I would live. And I swore no one would ever take that from me again. Since the moment I left the hospital, everything around me changed abruptly, as if I had stepped onto a terrible stage play. Daniel started appearing every morning, bringing toasted bread and coffee made exactly the way I liked. Though he had not even known I was lactose intolerant before, he fussed over tucking blankets around me when I coughed, pulled out chairs for me without being asked, and threw around sweet words he had ignored a month earlier. Ella, I cannot imagine life without you. I watched him, sometimes wondering if I was hallucinating, but then Linda walked in, performing even better than Daniel. My dear, I just called the restaurant and ordered your favorite lasagna. Eat plenty today, okay? My dear. A phrase that had never once left her mouth before. Now it echoed like a parrot's recitation. George also changed his tune, no longer ordering me to fetch him beers but now calling me precious Ella every time he mentioned my name. I was not stupid, and I was certainly not blind. I saw Linda's eyes flicker toward the copy of the inheritance documents I left on the table. I saw George scrolling through his phone, searching up the value of a vintage 1953 Cadillac. I saw Daniel, suddenly liking to hug me from behind, pressing his cheek against my shoulder and whispering, I think we should start thinking about having a baby, right? I froze immediately. Because I want something to bind us together forever. A real family. I did not respond. But in my mind, a clear label flashed, breeding trap. That night, I pretended to sleep. Daniel lay beside me, breathing evenly. But when the clock struck 2 in the morning, I heard the door creak open. I turned slightly, keeping my eyes barely open. Soft footsteps, whispering voices. Linda. Daniel, is she asleep? Yes. Mom, do not make her suspicious. Good, remember, you must get her pregnant before she changes her mind. Once there is a baby, her fortune will be tied to our family. I gripped the mattress hard to keep from leaping up. My heart pounded like a drum. But I kept pretending to sleep, even as tremors racked my body. Mom? I do not think we should force her. No forcing needed. Just make her believe she is loved. You can do that, right? Yes. My hand squeezed the sheet until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them all out. But I stayed still. I needed proof. I needed them to expose themselves fully. 3 days later, I invited Linda and George to stay for dinner. A small gathering, with wine and the lasagna Linda once boasted she cooked best. I poured wine for everyone except Daniel. I told him he was on antibiotics and needed to avoid alcohol. He nodded without question. I raised my glass. As they clinked glasses and laughed, I quietly turned on the recorder hidden in my jacket pocket. Linda's voice rang out, syrupy sweet. Ela, I mean it. You are a treasure. I have never seen Daniel so happy. I smiled, tilting my head. Surely it is because you are encouraging us to start a family, right? Linda burst out laughing. Oh, exactly. You know, having a child ties everything together. Family, emotions, and future. George chimed in. Do you know that inheritance, when not divided under a prenuptial agreement, becomes subject to the court's judgment if there is a child involved? Just a legal fact. Parents should know that, right? I nodded, my eyes fixed on the recorder, silently capturing every word. That night, after everyone thought I was asleep, or pretending to be, I retrieved the recorder, saving 3 copies. 1 emailed to my lawyer, 1 backed up to the cloud, and 1 hidden in the safe in my study. I did not need anyone to believe me based on feelings. I would let them incriminate themselves. And I swore, No one would chain me down with a child plan to lock up a fortune I had barely begun to enjoy. They could act all they wanted. But I was awake. The game had begun. I did not strike immediately. I needed the right moment, like a hunter waiting for the prey to step fully into the trap. 4 days after that fake, cheerful dinner, when Daniel sat beside me on the sofa, smiling sweetly and suggesting we should think about having children soon, I knew the moment had come. I turned to look at him, my gaze icy. "You are right, we should have a serious talk." Daniel's face lit up. He thought I was about to agree to his family's sick plan. He had no idea I had already prepared the final blow. "Tomorrow, I will file for divorce." The simple sentence dropped into the room like an explosion. Daniel's face turned pale in a single breath. What? Ella, you are joking, right?" I did not laugh. I did not shrug. I simply pulled a thin folder from the drawer. A divorce petition. Already signed. Daniel blinked rapidly, as if unable to believe what was happening. He jumped up, his voice nearly shouting. "You cannot do this. We are married." I stood up, facing him. After months of enduring, I finally felt taller than him. Not in stature, but in strength. "No, Daniel. I was the one who loved you with all my heart. But you and your family only loved the numbers in the bank account." He stammered. "I love you. I was just under pressure from my parents." "Pressure?" I let out a dry, bitter laugh. "What about all the times you stayed silent when your mom humiliated me? All the times you laughed when your dad ordered me to fetch beers like a maid? Was that pressure too?" He raised his hand as if to grab mine, but I stepped back. "Do not touch me." Linda and George, hearing the shouting, rushed in from the yard. Linda forced a fake smile. "What is going on, children? Keep your voices down. The neighbors might hear." I looked straight into her eyes. "No need to pretend anymore, Linda. I know your entire plan. You wanted to get me pregnant, tie me to your family, and easily control the inheritance I received." Linda's face turned ashen. George narrowed his eyes, his voice low and threatening. "This little girl. Do not think just because you have a little money you can do whatever you want." I pulled another folder from my bag. The prenuptial agreement they had once forced me to sign, the very document they thought would protect Daniel from a gold digger like me. I tossed it onto the table, my voice cold. This agreement saved me. According to Section 5, each party retains all assets acquired before and during the marriage, with no obligation of financial support after divorce. And according to Section 7, any personal inheritance remains the sole property of the heir, exempt from any disputes. I slowly leaned forward, my eyes never leaving their faces. To put it simply, you will not get a single penny from me. Daniel collapsed onto the couch, his hands covering his head. Linda clutched her purse tightly, her face twisted with anger. George's face turned red as he opened his mouth to curse, but I raised my hand to stop him. "Mom word, and I will sue all three of you for asset fraud and marriage deception." No one dared to speak. I turned and walked out of the house that I once thought would be a home. The door slammed shut behind me, like the final note of a tragic play I swore I would never return to. The next morning, I personally filed the divorce papers at the Rockingham County Courthouse. No warnings, no negotiations. Daniel received the summons that very afternoon. The legal battle was shorter than I expected. With a clear prenuptial agreement, records showing the inheritance dated before the marriage, and recordings exposing their fraudulent intentions, my lawyer wrapped everything up within 3 weeks. The day the court officially granted the divorce, I walked out of the courtroom feeling lighter than I ever thought possible. I did not want anything from Daniel. No money, no house, not even a single piece of furniture. I had the most important thing, freedom. Daniel tried calling me several times afterward. I did not answer. Linda sent a 3-page letter, dripping with both tears and threats. I burned it in the fireplace without reading past the first few lines. George? He did not even bother pretending anymore. I heard he sued Daniel over personal debts. That family, inside and out, was rotting away. As for me, I was preparing for the next chapter of my life. No longer the shadow lurking in the margins. No longer the bride who was belittled. I was Ella Whitmore, the woman who walked through hell, carrying a fire no one could extinguish. I left Daniel's house on a crisp October morning, the streets lined with golden leaves like a farewell carpet. I carried only 2 suitcases, one filled with clothes, the other with the old handwritten manuscripts I had hidden throughout my time living with them. I did not look back. I rented a small apartment in downtown Portsmouth, on the 3rd floor of a faded red brick building. It had only 2 rooms, a tiny bedroom, and an open space for the kitchen and living room. But to me, it was a kingdom. No more nightmares filled with judgment. No more the constant fear of being an outsider in what should have been my home. Only the sound of the wind through the windows, the scent of morning coffee, and the feeling of freedom soaking into my skin. I changed my phone number, blocked emails from Daniel, Linda, and George. I severed every remaining tie to the past, without an ounce of regret. After many sleepless nights, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with the life I had reclaimed. I took a small portion of my inheritance, exactly $1 million, and searched for a location right at the corner of Jefferson Street, where crowds flocked every weekend. The place had once been an old bakery, abandoned for nearly 2 years, but when I stepped inside, amid the dust and broken bricks, I saw something extraordinary. Potential. Just like me. Worn on the outside, but inside something precious had never dimmed. 3 months later, Whitmore Books officially opened its doors. Not a sleek, cold bookstore like the big chains. No machines, no harsh fluorescent lights. I wanted this place to feel like a hug. Oak shelves, warm golden lighting from vintage hanging lamps, soft linen armchairs lining the aisles, and the faint scent of vanilla and cedarwood drifting in the air. We did not just sell new books. Here there were antique volumes, limited editions, and leather-bound journals from the previous century. There was a corner just for children, with cloth tents and stuffed bears. There was a small room for Friday night book clubs. And most importantly, I donated 20% of our monthly profits to the First Light Foundation, helping underprivileged children access books for free. Every time I saw a child clutching an old but precious book, their eyes sparkling with wonder, I knew I had chosen the right path. One evening, while I was reorganizing the shelves, a boy about 12 years old, holding a copy of Treasure Island, peeked at me shyly. "Ma'am, I do not have enough money to buy this book." I smiled, walked over and squatted down in front of him. "Have you ever heard of the Secret Friend program?" The boy shook his head. I raised a finger, pretending it was a secret. "Sometimes, special friends leave money to buy books for kids like you. And today, I think they chose you." The boy's eyes widened, and he hugged the book tightly to his chest like it was a treasure. In that moment, all the past wounds, all the scars, seemed to fade away. I had made the right choice. Sometimes, I still heard bits and pieces about Daniel and his family through old friends. After the divorce, Daniel's career crumbled. His family's company got caught up in a major financial lawsuit. Linda suddenly sold the mansion, and George moved to another town, far from the scandal. I did not feel triumphant. I just felt free. They were the past, and I was living a life I chose for myself. No one dictating it, no one controlling it. On a winter night, after closing the bookstore, I sat alone by the window, watching the snow pile up outside. On the table was a steaming cup of hot cocoa, and next to it, my first unfinished manuscript, Light Through the Cracks. A story about women rising from ashes. I smiled, squeezing the cup gently in my hands. "Thank you, Uncle Edward," I whispered. "Thank you for believing in a little girl the world seemed to forget." A cold breeze slipped through the crack of the window, carrying a sweet, strange scent. Somehow, I knew he had heard me. And after a very, very long time, I was no longer afraid of the future. I was ready. Ella Whitmore had come back to myself. And I would never lose myself again. Ella's story reminds us that sometimes it is loss and betrayal that open the door to true freedom. When others see us only as a tool to exploit, we must remember that our worth does not lie in wealth or their approval. Freedom comes not from clinging to toxic ties, but from the courage to let go and start again. In the end, the strongest person is not the one who holds on to the most, but the one who knows how to let go and find themselves. What do you think about Ella's journey? If it were you, what choice would you make in her situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And do not forget to follow the channel for more powerful and emotional real-life family stories.